So Donald Trump is trying to brand himself as the guy taking criminals off the street, while simultaneously, the criminals he put back on the street continue to have trouble with the law. It seems like every time I take a look at the news, there's another pardoned January 6er being arrested, accused, or convicted of something, and in one case, even shot and killed by the police themselves. And I want to go over all of these people because it is astounding the types of people Donald Trump put back on the street. So first, let's talk about Emily Hernandez. She was seen at the Capitol holding a plaque that she stole out of Nancy Pelosi's office. Since being pardoned by Donald Trump, she has now been sentenced to 10 years in prison for a DUI accident where she got drunk, drove down the wrong side of the freeway, and hit and killed someone. So I'm going to show you guys this video about her. But first, I want to remind you guys, if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button. Also, if you haven't yet checked out the merch store at www.leftlaughs.com, please do that as well. Okay, let's look at this video of Emily Hernandez.
Nothing will ever bring her back. We have an empty hole in my heart that will always be there.
Emotional moments outside the Franklin County Courthouse after Capitol rioter Emily Hernandez was sentenced for killing 32-year-old Victoria Wilson in a drunk driving crash. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Bush.
And I'm Ann Allred. Just last week, President Donald Trump pardoned Hernandez for her involvement on January 6th. Our Justina Cornell joins us live from the newsroom to explain what happened in court today.
Just a few hours ago, a judge sentenced 24-year-old Emily Hernandez to 10 years in prison for a deadly DWI crash that happened January 5th, 2022. It was almost a year to the date of the Capitol riot.
She chose her actions that night, and she chose wrong.
Emily Hernandez walked into the Franklin County Courthouse ready to face her fate, and a judge gave her 10 years in prison for a deadly DWI crash January 5th, 2022. She pleaded guilty in November.
I think ultimately it speaks volumes to her actions and her regard for the justice system.
And she pleaded guilty before for her involvement on January 6, 2021, and served 30 days in federal prison. Video shows her holding a broken sign belonging to former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. A year later, Hernandez drove with a blood and alcohol level of .125 on Interstate 44 for several miles before crashing into another car.
To go as many miles as Emily did, how do you do that?
That car had a Franklin County couple inside, Victoria and Ryan Wilson. The couple just left dinner celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary.
Holidays are very different. There's always an empty seat. Her smile is missed.
Missed, but her presence was felt. Victoria's family made sure they represented the mother of two in court.
It was some relief to be able to turn and look her in her eyes and tell her how much harm she had really done to us.
In court, Hernandez called her own actions ungodly and apologized.
That's the choice she made. She has to live with it, so.
Victoria's family says even with this sentence, their family's missing piece will never be whole.
I don't feel like any amount that she serves is ever going to bring her back. It's never going to rectify her actions, but I'm hoping that maybe she'll change and be a better person.
Her defense attorney tried to recommend 120 days in parole, but that was denied. Right now, there is no date for a parole hearing.
I can't begin to give you a reason why no one would think it would be important to vet these people before letting them out on the street. Well, I know exactly why. If you're in most cases white and loyal to Donald Trump, it doesn't matter how horrible of a person you are, you will always be in his favor. And we're not talking about petty crimes here. We're talking about violent criminals and sexual predators. Imagine the pain of the families who are dealing with this loss because Emily Hernandez wasn't in jail where she should have been. These people were traitors to our country, and they should have spent years in jail, but in many cases, they spent days. And there were so many more. I mean, let's take a look at some of these. Matthew Huddle. Matthew Huddle was recently shot and killed by law enforcement. He got into an altercation with police officers. Now, imagine that for a second. A guy who got in altercations with police officers on January 6th gets pardoned by Donald Trump and then gets into altercations with police officers again. And in this case, police officers have to shoot and kill him. Now, there's people, who talk about this in the sense of, oh, Matthew Huddle wasn't doing anything wrong and stuff like that. But that is a bunch of BS. Obviously, a guy who was violent at the Capitol on January 6th was definitely violent with police officers, again, when being pardoned by Donald Trump. But let's look at others because, again, these are not just petty crimes we're talking about here. So there's also this guy named Theodore Middendorf. This guy, I have to read this for you. And hopefully, I can keep this PG for YouTube, but this one's pretty bad. Theodore Middendorf was accused by Illinois prosecutors of predatory criminal sexual assault of a child. His victim was 7 years old. This guy was pardoned by Donald Trump. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 19 years for this crime. So we're not talking about the weaponized Department of Justice here. This guy pled guilty to it. And again, pardoned by Donald Trump. Another guy, this guy's name is Peter Schwartz. When prosecutors made their sentencing recommendations to the judge, they found that this guy had over 35 other convictions. 35 prior convictions by this guy. And this guy was convicted of pepper spraying police officers on January 6th. Some of those convictions involved assaulting his wife and 14-year-old daughter. We're talking again about people who are violent criminals who were let out on the street by Donald Trump. Again, Donald Trump wants to talk about, Venezuela, dumping all of their criminals off on our streets. Meanwhile, he's dumping our criminals off on our streets. There's more of them. Unbelievably, there's more of them. David Daniel, another guy pardoned by Donald Trump. David Daniel of Mint Hill, North Carolina, is charged with production of child and possession of child, which allegedly involved a minor under the age of 12. This guy was pardoned by Donald Trump. Why in hell? I mean, there would be no one out there, even the MAGAs, I would think, if the Trump administration had come out and said, listen, we're going to pardon a bunch of these people because we thought, the Department of Justice was weaponized and yada, yada, yada. However, there are people out there there are people in jail right now who are sexual predators. We're not going to pardon them. I would think even the people who said pardon them all would say, okay, yeah, good call, not those people. But they decided to do it anyway. There's more of them. This guy, Daniel Ball. Daniel Ball, and arrest warrant records allege that Daniel Ball of Florida threw an explosive device that detonated upon at least 25 officers during the Capitol riot. Okay? Ball had a criminal record before his arrest for January 6th, including for domestic violence battery by strangulation, resisting law enforcement with violence, and battery on law enforcement officers. So, guy goes to the Capitol, detonates something that detonates on 25 officers, already has charges of resisting arrest, violence, battery towards officers. This guy was pardoned by Donald Trump for the January 6th insurrection. Andrew Taki of Texas pled guilty to assaulting police officers with bear spray and a metal whip on January 6th. So again, a lot of times they want to talk about the Department of Justice being weaponized against these people and all that. Most of these people pled guilty. We're not talking about people who maintain their innocence. They pled guilty to what they were accused of on January 6th. So these people pled guilty. However, this guy, the Harris County District Attorney in Texas, has said that Taki is wanted on 2016 charges of soliciting a minor online. It doesn't surprise me one bit that many of these January 6th insurrectionists are also sexual predators. It doesn't surprise me. It shouldn't surprise you. And I know many of you are going to comment that, birds of a feather flock together. and you're going to say, hey, Donald Trump is this, so are these people. I agree with you. I understand. But I think there was no vetting of these people at all. I think they just decided we're going to pardon them and not even care. And so there you have this guy here. Another guy. I mean, this goes on and on and on. Casey Hopkins. At the Capitol, he had a lengthy, troubled criminal history, including a 2002 conviction for forcible rape, which resulted in a 7-year prison sentence. So, I'm going to read this verbatim from the article. The defendant had forcible intercourse with the victim, choked her to a point of impairing her vision, banged her head onto a wall, urinated into her mouth. A guy like that, pardoned by Donald Trump. These are the people we're putting back on the street. Edward Richmond Jr. In 2004, Edward Richmond Jr. was serving in the U.S. Army when he was convicted of manslaughter after shooting a handcuffed Iraqi cowherder in the head with his rifle. This guy was pardoned by Donald Trump for what he did on January 6th. Jonathan Mellis had a previous felony conviction of drug trafficking conspiracy, manufacturing or selling methamphetamine. He had a 20-year prison sentence. He assaulted, resisted police officers on January 6th. He was pardoned by Donald Trump. Benjamin Martin. These go on and on. Like, if you thought it was just 1 or 2 or 3, it's not. People are trying to lie and say that there's a plethora of these people. But imagine people going to the Capitol on January 6th to commit crimes already having criminal records. Of course they did. This guy pled guilty in 2002 to a 2016 battery charge where he repeatedly struck his 14-year-old daughter, and a 2018 battery charge where he choked his girlfriend and dragged her back into the house after she tried to flee. Assault of his 14-year-old daughter, assault of his girlfriend. This guy was pardoned by Donald Trump. That's Benjamin Martin. Edward Hemingway. Serious criminal history. 2006, pled guilty to sexual battery and criminal confinement. His probation was revoked. However, he was resentenced 5 years imprisonment. In connection with January 6th, he pled guilty to a charge of parading, demonstrating, picketing at the Capitol after he breached a U.S. building while chanting "Stop the Steal" and "Our House." He was pardoned by Donald Trump as well. On the street. I don't even know how many that was. About 10. And that's only the ones who either have been convicted since or had prior convictions. There will be more. People who showed up that day, the 1,500 people that were pardoned, the 1,500 or so that showed up that day to commit crimes are criminals. They probably, if I had to guess, hundreds of them, by the time Donald Trump is out of office, will be back in jail or maybe even deceased because of things or problems they're having with the law. Donald Trump is not someone who cares about criminals being on our streets. He only cares about criminals he doesn't like being on our streets. If you're a criminal and you love Donald Trump and you show and pledge loyalty to him, he will do anything for you. You will always be in his favor. This is absolutely pathetic. And this is what we're going to deal with for 4 years because people chose not to show up and vote for Kamala Harris. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button. Go to leftlaughs.com. Check out the merch store. I really do appreciate you guys. Period.
Don't want no enemies or ops. Envy in they heart, I tell them stop. Vacation on the